Hello and welcome to Airheads. You're not
Mate, what are you doing?
Tom, I have a voice.
Let me let you into a secret. No one wants to hear it.
Can you tell how excited we were to see Prince Charles joining the crown in episode 6?
Welcome to Airheads. Not so serious look at the serious business of the crown.
We are recapping episodes 4, 5 and 6 of The Crown today. So if you haven't watched those episodes, go back and watch them and you can come and listen to us when you're finished, because this will be a very spoilery discussion.
Maeve, before we start, I'd like to hear you say the name of episode 4.
Bubbikins? Oh my god.
I love that.
So as we started watching, obviously Tom and I were just dying to find out who or what is Bubbikins. And were you surprised?
I was really surprised. I definitely thought it was going to be more of a queen mother kind of thing. Like, you can imagine the queen mother calling her Bubbikins.
But we did get some other nicknames in this episode. Because we also had the introduction of Princess Anne. Oh my god.
That was such a dramatic entrance, but great.
As we talked about before, the director Benjamin Caron loves doing these shots of the main characters in silhouette or in profile before showing us their face, doing the full reveal. Yes, this is a royal, because we all have to know this is also a human. And in this case, it was Princess Anne's boots and her booty up until we saw her face responding to Prince Philip's summons of Sweetie.
And, I mean, given Prince Philip's history, we weren't entirely sure who the hell was going to come in wearing those jodhpurs. But Princess Anne was phenomenal.
Yeah, the actress is Erin Doherty, and we should note she has a very different accent in real life, but I only realised that after watching it. I was so convinced by her accent. I thought she gave such a good performance. I thought it was pretty similar, actually, to Vanessa Kirby, to have this real breakout star. I feel like she's going to be huge when this show comes out. She's not in it, that much, but
every scene really stands out, though.
Total scene stealer. I think it's quite interesting when she's introduced that we see her interacting with Prince Philip, and the show really emphasises the bond between them, and she's even quite similar to him in how she speaks and her very dry sense of humour, much like him, rather than kind of highlighting her relationship with her mother, which, as we know now in real life, the two of them are so close, but I guess we're going to get through some sort of teething problems in their relationship over the next couple of seasons. But the reason that Prince Philip wants to see her, as we know, is because he is interested in doing a documentary. He's interested in inviting the BBC into the royal household after his appearance on US television flopped.
Such a disaster. This was the appearance where he started talking about the financial hardships of the royal family, saying that they had to sell their yacht, that he had to give up polo, that he might have to give up polo, and they might have to move into smaller premises.
I was obviously thrilled to see the introduction of the Irish journalist, who is called John Armstrong. Totally fictional journalist, he's not real.
Never existed.
Obviously, as a journalist with The Guardian, the left-leaning newspaper. I think it's like one of the only newspapers that doesn't have a royal reporter, but in the world of The Crown, he is only too thrilled to lash into Philip and call him a jumped up freeloader. So Philip realises he needs to do something about it. I thought this really tried to show Philip as a modernising force in the family. Like, for people of our generation, Philip has always been so old and seemed like so old-fashioned and set in his ways.
And the absolute last person you'd go to with PR problems. He's like been the cause of the PR problems for so long.
But in the show, he seems to be someone who's trying to bring the monarchy into modernity. And, we saw previously that he wanted the coronation to be filmed, and now in this episode he wants to have this documentary so people can get a sense of what the royals are like.
And it calls back to his comments in the very first episode of this season, where he's worried about the government turning against the crown.
Yeah.
That he is kind of aware of public opinion and political opinion. Doesn't exactly go very well for him, but Peter Morgan does seem to be showing him as someone who is at least trying.
Yeah, and like he says to Anne, he wants her to be at the forefront because she's good value for money. And I love what she says, like a long-lasting pair of boots. Which, you know, not untrue.
After having that long-lasting sequence of her walking in her boots down the corridors of Buckingham Palace.
Of course, this whole thing was filmed long before Harry and Meghan's documentary, but with that so fresh in our minds, I couldn't help thinking about that, especially, you know, there was a lot of criticism over the fact that Tom Bradby had discussed with Harry some of the things he was going to ask him. And in this case, we see the BBC filmmakers speaking to Philip and they're talking about the logistics of it. And that just made me think of Harry and Meghan.
And here you have a coup in Athens, which is, we get these kind of mysterious shots right from the beginning of the episode. Who is this mysterious nun? What is this unnamed convent? What's going on? Where did this sapphire come from? And finally it's revealed. She's Philip's mum.
I know. I guess they wanted to put a spotlight on her because people really don't know about her. I didn't know about her. And I thought it was kind of curious how they did it. I'm not sure if it was all that effective. For Philip, she's a kind of bane in this whole process because he is trying to avoid her being on camera. In the end, she's the one that sort of redeems them.
Yeah, that headline, The Royal Saint.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. We should talk first about the negative reception of this documentary. So obviously in the documentary they're trying to make them look like real normal people, so they get them to do stuff like have a barbecue or sit around watching TV, and Princess Margaret's like, we'd never do this is not our lives.
And then they're also trying to show them working hard for their money. You have that clip of the Queen saying, world matters are so complex, aren't they?
I know. It's it's so performative, but it kind of raises the question, like when we see that scene of the Queen talking to the Prime Minister Harold Wilson, they're sort of debating what the public want from the royal family. He's saying, you aren't normal people. And it's so illuminating that she's like, aren't we? We wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, we work, get tired, get colds, have uncles that embarrass us, Christmases to ensure. We are perfectly normal.
Our idea of normal is just like, well, we're biologically human, so...
But then he explains to her that the truth is that people don't know what they want from the royals other than we want you to be ideal. She gets quite frustrated and she's saying no human being is ideal, only God is ideal, and that ideally for her the family would be kept out of sight and that would be better for their survival and their sanity, but they have to be on display.
Yeah, and she talks about the mystery and the smoke and mirrors and the protocol as being not there to keep them apart, but there to keep us alive. So we get some idea of what she thinks about all these grand rituals and ceremonies as something there to keep like a protective screen in between her and her people.
But it's something that is still being figured out now. Like, we still have this fine line between being relatable and being over emotional, as we've seen so much in the response to Harry and Meghan's documentary. People don't know what they want from the royals other than for them to be ideal. So basically the documentary is not well received and commentators widely mock it. They say they're wooden, they're stupid, they're vain, all of this stuff. The whole plan totally backfires. Philip still won't give up. He decides to get this Guardian journalist who has given it such a bad review in for another attempt to impress him by interviewing Anne.
Yeah, he gets out the secret weapon again. But Anne actually proves to be a much better strategist than Philip. So she definitely was the right person for Philip to go to, but she knows that she's not what the Guardian journalist needs. So she pushes Princess Alice, we suddenly see why she was brought into the episode, into the path of this giddy journalist who's so excited to be in Buckingham Palace and presumably keen to tear it all down.
We all know this isn't a documentary, but we should talk about inaccuracies here. It just might be interesting for people, I think, because there was a piece in the Times that pointed out that initial appearance, the TV interview that Philip did, where he talked about having to sell the yacht, didn't actually air until 5 months after the BBC documentary. So it wasn't this trigger the way it is in the show. And that it got a front page story in The Guardian, but that it was mainly descriptive. It wasn't panning him or calling him the jumped up freeloader or whatever. And finally, I guess the big thing that comes at the end, the interview with Princess Alice, apparently, according to the Times, she didn't give an interview to any journalist at The Guardian or, by all accounts, to anyone at all. So that's a more creative use of dramatic license, I think.
In reality, she was dying at this point, so she wasn't running about into the path of oncoming journalists.
Oh, and when we see the Queen refusing to let the documentary be aired or repeated again or aired abroad at all, that also is not true. It was repeated at least 3 times. But I liked a lot that the Times journalist asked Olivia Colman how she felt about this historical inaccuracy. And her response was so good. She said, "You know, I saw a website that suggested that royals were all lizards, which is hilarious. There are worse places to learn from, but of course, as I keep saying, what happens behind closed doors we don't know. So if people are thinking that it's gospel, that's unfair and unfair to themselves. I hope people are more intelligent."
So she's saying that definitely behind closed doors,
the royals are lizards, yes. I do think, though, this is a particularly significant storyline in The Crown in terms of how we interpret The Crown, because to have that juxtaposition of this very wooden, false portrait of the family in the show just lends more legitimacy to the portrayal of the family in The Crown and makes you think, oh, well, what we're watching here, this is the truth. And this is a more accurate portrayal of what the family are really like behind closed doors.
Yeah, the family aren't able to try and present themselves in their best light in this because they're not in control. So
it is lending it that credibility.
At the same time as snatching it away.
Yeah, at the same time, like, by completely embellishing the storyline.
Speaking of embellished storylines, episode 5, The Coup, saw the return of the Queen's lover.
Oh my god, Tom, you can't say that. They're going to put you in the tower.
Alleged lover.
You probably remember Porchy, Lord Porchester, from previous seasons when it was suggested that the Queen had a bit of a crush on him, may have been considering marrying him. People wanted her to marry him. Well, he's back and people are not happy about it. At the time we're recording this season isn't even out yet. And the Queen's former secretary, Dickie Arbiter, has already given a damning comment to the Times where he said, quite amazingly, "This is very distasteful and totally unfounded. The Queen is the last person in the world to have ever considered looking at another man." Like, did he hear himself? Those words coming out of his mouth?
It's so stupid. A main part of this episode is we get a glimpse of what the Queen considers to be her lost life. The life of horse rearing that she thinks would have made her very happy if it wasn't for the fact that somebody refused to do the job they were born to do.
Yeah. Like, they make it so clear how much happier she is when she's not doing her job. They have a scene on the train where she's kind of wearily writing her papers, and then her secretary says, "Pens down, Your Majesty, 10 minutes to Newmarket," and she immediately perks up straight away. It seems so realistic because anytime we see the Queen with a horse, she's got the biggest smile on her face. You never see her happier than when she's around horses. But the happiness doesn't last long here because she's going to watch her racehorse apprentice at Ascot, tipped to win. He's the favourite, but he loses.
Pretty badly as well. So badly that she ends up going off on a tour of stud farms in France with none other than her personal stud, Porchester. And she looks so happy, like you said. This seems like an episode where Olivia Colman was really able to like let loose as much as you can when you're the Queen.
Oh yeah, she said in an interview that her personal highlight of the whole season was getting to have another go at riding horses. And she said, I did get to have a little amazing magical moment with a foal.
We should say that this wasn't the main plot, perhaps, of this episode. The A plot was the coup, which involved new character Charles Dance as Dickie Mountbatten. But we weren't really that interested in this storyline. Other than it gave a sort of welcome Game of Thrones-y scheming quality to what was going on, because you can't really see Charles Dance anymore without seeing Tywin Lannister.
Yeah, definitely. And he was so formidable, that first shot of him in all his military finery.
I've never seen so many medals on one man.
He looked amazing though. But I understand that Peter Morgan wants to tell these more surprising stories that people don't know about, but this just fell flat for me.
He is meant to be a big confidant and influence on Charles's life as he was growing up in the future, so imagine we might get some of that.
And we know he died tragically in an IRA terrorist attack in Sligo in Ireland, so I presume that's going to be coming up next season. I mean, I'm glad they have Charles Dance in the role because he's just amazing and I love watching him, but I'm disappointed with this as his introduction into the show.
Yeah.
But it did work for me in emphasizing how boring her real life is compared to this fantasy life with horses, in the same way that whenever we went from a scene of the Queen and Porchy to a scene of Cecil King or whatever, it really felt like an intrusion. And similarly, you get the sense that for the Queen, all of this stuff really seems like an intrusion. Like at the end, when she hears Mountbatten is calling her while she's having dinner, she's like, not now. And it's like, stop interrupting. You feel that way as a viewer, and also you relate to the Queen's feelings.
Or when she's talking to Harold Wilson, who's saying, we're going to have to devalue the pound, there's going to be this, and this terrible thing happening. And she's looking at a painting of a horse. She's not even paying attention. She just turns and says, well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be here. I'm going on holiday.
I did like the scenes with the Queen and Porchy. I was rooting for them last season because I was so angry at Philip for his affairs, and I wanted the Queen to have something of her own going on.
And she did, because they shared a sandwich. A real Lady and the Tramp.
And they went horse riding, which I feel like is the Queen's idea of a perfect date. And then we got this stellar scene where they were having dinner together and the Queen gets a little bit emotional. Like, we know Olivia Colman is a very expressive actor, so it's all the more impressive when she can do those very restrained scenes of the Queen. And then to have this kind of a scene where she is being a little bit more emotional but still trying to hold it in, I thought was just a fantastic moment of acting from her. The bit where she says, somehow today has managed to be one of the most enjoyable days of my life and at the same time one of the most depressing, just hits you hard, doesn't it? People say that this show is a PR exercise for the Crown, the real life Crown, and you really feel it in moments like that because you just feel so sorry for her, and you really get the sense that she's trapped by her position and that she'd just rather be doing anything else.
I thought it was really interesting as well because you kind of think of her uncle's abdication as something that happened in the past and then everything changed and everyone got used to it. And certainly, like, I just never think of her as anything other than the Queen. And that's kind of the point of this stuff that she's saying and what Porchy says to her. But the fact that this is like a wound that stays with her that she's had a whole life ripped away from her was unexpectedly moving for me. I didn't think I could really be made to feel that sorry for the Queen, but I was moved.
Especially when she's like, can I tell you something and you promise you won't say it to anyone? And then she unleashes this, like, this is how I'd like to spend all my time. Training horses, breeding horses, racing horses. It's what makes me truly happy. And I actually think it's what I was born to do, until the other thing came along that someone else was born to do, that they elected not to do. You can hear that sort of bitterness, but it also really underscores the Crown's view that this woman is a martyr who has made this tremendous sacrifice, and she hasn't complained about it, and she's just got on with it, and she's so deserving of our admiration and respect.
Yeah, we get another little glimpse into her feelings for Porchy when she says, on days like today, in places like this, with company like this, you get a glimpse of what it all might have been like, the unlived life, and how much happier it might have made me.
Like, again, it's pretty heavy-handed. They make it very explicit. But I was so excited when she said with company like this. I think I yelped while we were watching it. But even Porchy, his reaction is really good. He's like speechless. He looks so overcome. Saved by the bell then when the aide comes and gets her to talk to the PM. The phone call with the Prime Minister was really good, though. I'm loving Jason Watkins as Harold Wilson. He's so good at so many different kind of interactions with the Queen, like with those very blunt, straightforward ones, with the more kind of reflective conversations, with the awkward ones. This is kind of one of the latter ones where he's telling her he knows about the coup and he's almost threatening her.
Yeah, he's almost confrontational, but not quite. Which I think it's really difficult to get that kind of balance because he is talking to the Queen, but he's also trying to make his point. He does it so well. So he is telling the Queen that he knows about the coup and it's really not on her family interfering with his government. And the Queen says, when he threatens to take steps against them, the Queen says, even with me. And he gravely intones, Your Majesty, and hangs up. How formidable.
And I actually really liked the aftermath of this phone call. I know you have different feelings, but again, you get the sense that, like, this has just messed up her whole lovely holiday she was having, this boring political stuff that she just has to deal with, and you see all of that in her face, like just incredible acting where she has that cold fury, as we heard in that palace statement to the BBC recently, like that's written all over her face. She's walks back to the room with that very steely determination and she says, drink up, Porchy, we're going home.
My issue with this is I love the acting at the dinner. I love the acting on the telephone. I loved the acting on the walking back to dinner. And I hated drink up, Porchy, we're going home. She's not Han Solo. This, I don't know, as a line, it kind of diffused a lot of that good work. I would have really liked to see her go and angrily take her seat and finish her dinner and say something.
But I felt like this moment seemed to me very much like Claire Foy's Queen, and you know, the transition hasn't been totally seamless, obviously, because Olivia Colman is so famous and we know her acting so well. But this seemed like the kind of Queen that Claire Foy's Queen would grow up to be, to me.
Yeah. So
you could kind of draw a line there, I think, and at other times, I don't know if that's always the case. But my favourite scene, the scene when the Queen gets back to the palace. Okay, so she has that frosty exchange with Mountbatten.
Another great example of her, like, being able to exude fury without saying anything.
Oh my God, vibrating with rage. But that was good. Even better was when she gets back to her office and Philip sees her and says, you! And we learn that they actually haven't seen each other in nearly a month. Incredible. And he is immediately very jealous that she's been spending so much time with Porchy. He's kind of insecure and he asks, was it fun? kind of rudely, kind of bitchy. And she's very sternly like, it was a fact-finding expedition. It was educational. And they have this like tension between them where he's saying, well, if he's going to be the racing manager, he's going to be around all the time. And she's like, with any luck. And you think, oh God, you know, he's about to storm out. And just as he's about to exit the doors, he spins around, blazes back to her desk and grabs her for a steamy kiss.
I love the amount of snogging we're getting between these two. Fantastic. And the exchange that follows. So the Queen says as he walks away, I'll be up in a minute. He says, oh, will you? And the Queen says, yes, I thought so.
But it's like actually a romantic moment and like a sexy moment between the two of them, like a woman that literally no one on earth sees as a sexual being. And to have that scene, I really appreciate it, and also was so charmed by the moment when Philip is walking out of the room with a huge grin on his face, and as he turns the corner you see the Queen's been watching him the whole time and she's got like a little coy smile of her own.
She hates to see him leave, but she loves to watch him walk away.
Because I heard in that New York Times profile of Peter Morgan that they had been considering ending with a scene related to the coup storyline, and that Peter Morgan was like, no, we need something a little hotter. And thank God, because this is like one of my favourite scenes in the whole season so far.
Apart from the scene we didn't talk about, which was Charles Dance in the bath.
With his dog.
That was nice.
But my favourite episode so far was episode 6, and I'm going to let you say the name of the episode this time. Because you're part Welsh.
So this episode was called Tuizo Gymru.
What's that mean? Oh my God, you didn't even check. I gotta look it up now.
Oh my God, my granddad would be so upset.
It means
with me.
Prince of Wales. Okay, well, great. And going into this episode, I was so impatient for Charles at this point. I am such a huge fan of Josh O'Connor. He was incredible in God's Own Country. Just one of my favourite movies I've ever seen. And absolutely loved him in it. And he looks so much like Charles. As Jared Harris even acknowledged
To me.
to Tom at the theatre the other day. But I was blown away. He is incredible as Charles.
His kind of wincing look and the voice is spot on.
Oh my God, the reveal is one of my favourites so far.
Yeah.
So we see a backstage area, lots of actors in costume and makeup warming up, and the camera pans around and we see one of the Royal Protection Officers, and then whoosh, we've got Prince Charles doing some kind of vocal exercises and facial exercises in the mirror, and oh my God, he just is the image of him, and the way he does that slightly upturned corner of his mouth,
Yeah, it's like pulled to the side.
So like Charles.
It's uncanny because we've been even looking at interviews with Charles recently, and for some reason we looked at one that was recent and one from when he was younger, and we were like, oh God, he does that thing with his mouth, doesn't he, where he like pulls it to one side. Isn't that interesting? And then Josh just has it.
Mastered it.
Yeah.
But it's about much more than imitation. When we were approaching these Charles episodes, I was thinking so much about the news story recently in The Sun about how Charles's aides had allegedly banned stars of The Crown from attending a Netflix event that Charles went to in April. And there's another story about how the staff were so paranoid that this was going to really affect his approval ratings and make him an unpopular king just at the time he was likely to be ascending to the throne. But
He doesn't need to worry.
oh my God, he honestly should be sending him a thank you letter. Like, Peter Morgan is his PR man, basically. The portrayal of Charles is shockingly sympathetic.
Yeah, I haven't seen a character that is so lonely and misunderstood.
You just desperately want to hug all the time. And I think it will get more grating as it goes on. You know, you hear about Charles so much, even now, seeing himself as a victim constantly, and you can kind of allow that a bit more when someone is young. But in this case, it was so effective. So as it starts, the episode is all about his investiture as Prince of Wales, and
to his Cymru.
And the Prime Minister is talking to the Queen about the investiture plans, and he's saying that there is tension between Wales and England at the moment, and that it could really help to heal that if they were to send Charles to Wales and to get him to make part of his speech in Welsh. And we see the Queen is like kind of already a bit dismissive of Charles, saying like, finally he's content at school and he likes acting, it's how he can express himself.
Something she has no idea about.
Dripping with disdain.
We really see Olivia Colman be a monster in this episode, I would say.
Just such a cold mother. Like, we saw a good bit of it last season in the Gordonstone episode, where you saw that detached, very cold relationship between Prince Philip and Charles. But this one is so much more about the Queen and Charles, and they really nail it. Like the scene when you have the whole family gathered in one of the rooms to tell Charles that he's going to have to spend a term in Wales, and you have the full group of them lined up on one side and Charles so far away from them, totally on his own.
Yeah.
It really highlights his isolation, or his feelings of isolation anyway. But I did like that you did get that scene with him and Anne. Like, love any appearance of Anne, but this was particularly nice because we don't really like know much about their relationship now, but to see that there was that warmth between them and that they were laughing, and he was kind of asking her, you know, why is she never like that with you, so vile and cold, and she says very frankly, because I'm relevant. I rather wish she'd be like that with me. It would suggest significance. And
you get the feeling like she'd be able to cope with it a lot better than Charles as well.
Yeah, and it again kind of recalls the relationship between the Queen and Princess Margaret, because you have them talking about swapping and having her be the heir instead, and how she'd be more suitable and all that stuff.
I really like this scene with Anne and Charles because it felt like a teen drama. It was like, oh my god, Mum, what you done? Oh.
And then we go to Wales. I just loved every scene in Wales, and I felt like with the coup episode, for example, any scenes that didn't have the royals in them, or any of the main royals in them, you were a little bit like, okay, when's the Queen coming back? But with this storyline with the Welsh nationalists, I was so intrigued, you know. Giving my sympathies, but to see that group of the Welsh nationalists gathered in the pub and speaking in Welsh, and having that whole contrast of the shots of the town so dreary and dark and grey and unwelcoming, and then when you see like Charles coming into the town and reading that "Welcome to Wales" sign, and it's so poignant because he gets such an unwelcome reception of protesters and people booing and holding signs saying "Revolution yes, Prince no." And I particularly loved the tutor, Teddy.
Yeah, it was so different from the Aberfan episode where you had everyone wanting the Queen to go somewhere to make an appearance, and now you have a royal turning up and getting a really bad reception. And then you kind of, as the episode goes on, you realise that Prince Charles kind of has that reception wherever he goes. Like, nobody wants to talk to him, people slam doors in his face, and the person that we turn to is the unlikely figure of the tutor.
I know. I mean, I guess if you're being cynical about it, you could see this as the most, like, over-the-top monarchist storyline, because you have someone who is staunchly anti-monarchist. We see him being told he is going to teach Charles, and he says, "You must be joking, I'm Republican nationalist. You can't make me do this, it would violate every belief in my body." And he is so angry. And then by the end of it, he is totally softened to Charles. Even this most hardened, most ardent Republican can't resist Charles, and his wife is the same. But we should talk a little bit about their relationship anyway with him, Charles and Teddy.
It is like Peter Morgan's done the thing of let's go to the Guardian journalist who gave us such a bad review by picking the most unlikely lot.
But maybe it's also like a micro storyline, like a meta storyline about Peter Morgan himself, or like Olivia Colman or any of the cast, because read an interview with almost any member of the cast and they all say, I was raised by very left-wing parents, I'm very left-wing, I don't believe in the monarchy, I wasn't interested in the royal family, but now I'm in love with my character, or now I'm in love with the royals. So yeah, you get this sense that nobody can resist.
So you get Prince Charles very boldly confronted with someone who is totally opposed to his position and kind of by extension to him. And you see it's such a shock to him that people could have these kind of views. So when Teddy is saying to him that the role of the Prince of Wales suppresses Welshness and promotes a ubiquitous Britishness, Charles says, Britain is Wales and Wales is Britain, which just seems to be such a kind of ignorant frame of mind.
Yeah, and we see that again when they have that dinner with the heads of the departments. Oh my God, it's painful to watch. And they're asking him about the original Prince of Wales and about the library, and he just demonstrates this total lack of knowledge about anything to do with Welsh history. It's, oh my God, it's so embarrassing. But then Teddy confronts him on it when Charles starts doing vocal warm-ups to try and sound out the words in one of their lessons.
Incredible scene. Oh my God.
But Teddy's not laughing. And he says, I understand it's all a bit of fun for you. Do you have any idea how embarrassing last night was for the rest of us? How humiliating? And he asks Charles to pay us respect, give us the slightest impression that you care about any of this before you turn around and never show up again like the last Prince of Wales and the one before him.
And Charles is so ashamed.
Yeah, you wonder would the real Charles have been a bit more indignant and sort of proud about it. I really liked, though, hearing more about this Welsh nationalist movement. Like, I do think it's important in The Crown to show that other side, even if they inevitably like fall for him or whatever. But I'll always appreciate a Republican character, and I loved Teddy. And I did think their relationship was quite sweet. We see so many scenes of Charles like just totally on his own, and that like heartbreaking scene where he's in his like really basic bedroom and he hears the music next door and he goes to try and make friends and they literally shut him out, like slam the door in his face. And oh, that walk back to his room where the personal protection officer is trying to fade into the background and everyone can see that he's just been rejected. Oh my God, it's
it's very awkward.
But then when Ted even asks him if he's gonna be out with his friends that night, and he says he's just gonna go back to his room, and he's like, oh, you don't have any friends? And he says, oh, it's fine, I'm incredibly used to it. Oh my God.
So this kind of follows in a tradition of royals becoming friends with people who are paid to spend time with them. But Charles gets invited for a sympathy dinner at Ted's house.
Tea dinner. I really felt for him in the scene where Teddy and his wife Sylvia are putting their son to bed, and Charles looks like, as she says, like he's never seen this before, and that he just looks heartbroken. To have that contrast of the three of them heading off up the stairs and Charles alone in this room.
With that pained look that Josh O'Connor does so well. And that is so Charles.
Again, it's just painting this portrait of an incredibly lonely figure.
And luckily that sense of loneliness and being overlooked allows him to identify with the Welsh.
Yeah, I do think it is interesting because, you know, it's a very sympathetic portrayal, but it's not like a totally blindly flattering portrayal, we still see him being very, very socially awkward. We see him feeling very sorry for himself when he learns about the Welsh village that had been drowned under a reservoir the government had installed to supply water to Liverpool. Immediately he sees it in light of how it relates to him, and he's like, oh, no wonder so many people want to stop me. Revenge. And Teddy has to point out, like, it's not about you, it's not about revenge, it's just that Welsh people don't want to be spoken down to by people who are so remote, so far away from you that they don't know what you need. And then you get another really cutting response from Charles when he says, yes, I know how that feels, with the saddest smile in the world.
The smile that melts the heart of even the hardened Republican wife.
But he's so moved by the dinner and his interactions with these Welsh nationalists that he decides to add to his speech.
Yeah, this was a very sly trick. He wants to put some extra words in, but in Welsh, so that his mum won't know. I loved Olivia Colman coming to the investiture.
We already knew she wasn't going to be happy about the changes to the speech because we saw her and Philip talking about it earlier, and Philip was like, well, you might have done it, but that was you, and this is him, a horse of a very different colour.
Yeah, they've already vetoed it. It's still not entirely clear to me why the Queen has such a look of fury on her face anytime she has to do anything with Charles. Like, she looks grim beyond belief coming down, or rather up, to Carnarvon Castle. But I guess maybe she's reminded of this person who's going to be taking over from her.
Yeah, I think it really must be quite hard to be looking at a person who is both your son and you're supposed to love, but also who's the person who's going to replace you. And it must make you kind of want to put your foot down and be like, I'm not ready to give it over to you yet, I'm still here.
And nothing says I'm here to stay quite like a massive padded hat.
Oh my god, this is such an amazing outfit. I remember seeing pictures of them filming this and having the side by side, and it's a fantastic recreation. It looks so much like what she actually wore, this like shell helmet. So many of the hats this season, by the way, have been like really, really good, but this is definitely my favorite. And you know, I was actually reading that in real life Charles is rumored to have worn a bulletproof vest under his robes because people were worried about actual threat of a terrorist attack at the event, because that's how bad the tensions were.
Do you think the hat was bulletproof? That's why it was so thick.
We see then, you know, it coming full circle that even though Teddy doesn't, he's like, oh, I have certain boundaries, I'm not going to go to the investiture, but he still watches it with all his friends in the pub and like tells him to shut up as soon as Charles starts speaking. But I did really like the addition that Charles made when he said, it is important that we respect that Wales has her own identity, her own character, her own will, her own voice.
And he's definitely just talking about Wales there.
It did kind of make me look forward to when they do have more scenes about Irish Republicans and seeing how they're going to handle like the Northern Irish storylines. We did get one final scene then between Charles and Teddy where he's giving him the anthology of British tongue twisters gift and Teddy asks him how the speech was received, and he's like, oh well, that's the good thing about doing it in Wales, they couldn't understand a word of it.
But he doesn't get away with it for very long because the Queen has her translators on it.
He goes back to the palace and, I mean, immediately you've got that cold, detached relationship right up in the forefront again when he asks to see her and her aide is like, she would prefer if it waited until the morning.
And then when he does go in and she's not even looking at him basically, and she is particularly upset because she thinks it's very clear that he was talking about his relationship with her in the speech. So she says, the similarity between Wales' suffering and yours was clear, to which Charles replies, only to you. which I thought was a very good line. But the Queen counters to all of Wales.
And she's got the newspaper headlines to prove it. I just loved the acting between them in this scene. I loved how even when Charles enters the room and he does have that sort of hangdog
stoop,
coming into the room, and the Queen, her back is so stiff, like you can totally tell just even from how she's sitting that again she's furious. And you know, it's so different from what we usually see of Olivia Colman, but she does it so effectively. And the interaction that they have then when he is saying, isn't there a similarity between my predicament and the Welsh? Am I listened to in this family? Am I seen for who and what I am? Do I have a voice? Then we get her very clear distillation of royal duty when she says, to say nothing, do nothing is the hardest thing of all. It takes the utmost strength. It's not natural, not human. To be royal is to be not human. It's unnatural, the kind of job they have to do. But it's just pathetic when he's crying out, saying, I'm not just a symbol, mummy, I have a voice.
It's one of these scenes where you would describe Charles as whining. Like that line, I think.
Yeah. But then the sympathy again falls back onto Charles when she says, let me let you into a secret. No one wants to hear it.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely brutal.
And there's like a distinction between her actions here to the Aberfan episode, where I think Aberfan, her like coldness was this almost passive coldness where she didn't know how to act, so she didn't do anything. Whereas this is like a very active, very aggressive hostility towards her own son. I think it is incredible acting from Olivia Colman.
And Josh O'Connor. Yeah. I was reading an interview with him where he said he felt like whenever he was doing a scene with Olivia Colman, he was doing the best acting of his life. And you can see that. They play so well together. It makes me very intrigued to see the Diana storylines next season. And also just in general, I am fascinated by what they're going to do if they are going to continue to be this sympathetic to Charles. You wonder, are they going to offer a more complicated Diana than we're used to seeing and hearing about?
Yeah. Well, we should probably wrap up now. So what would be your lows of these 3 episodes?
I think my low was the coup storyline. I felt like we were on a really good trajectory there and every episode was very strong, but it just stalled for me on that one, and it really only worked as a buffer to the Queen storyline, so there was too much of it for me. What about you?
My low was drink up Portugal, we're going home. I can't, it really stood out to me from these 3 episodes as like a line which I think should have been different. But my high was Josh O'Connor's amazing tongue twister scene. In this episode, it was very rare to get Charles looking happy, but he had such joy on his face when he was doing the tongue twisters and getting them right.
Yeah.
And it did remind me of when you actually see Prince Charles like cutting a cake and he's got
or making a speech and doing jokes and like laughing harder at his own jokes than anyone else. Like he loves to perform.
And I did really like as well when you saw him in the theatrical makeup. I thought it was high camp.
But also so pathetic. Acting as a king in a play, which by the way he never did that play in real life. He did do a play, just not that play. Yeah, Josh O'Connor is sensational. I am so excited to see more of him in it. But my high has got to be Erin Doherty as Princess Anne.
Oh yeah.
What a rock star. We don't see that much of Anne's personality in real life. Like, we know her as the royal who always does the most public engagements, who does the more pedestrian engagements. She's not typically the most glamorous royal, but she is, as Philip says in this episode, in one of these episodes, the most low profile, unpretentious royal we've got. But in these episodes, when we see her with this dry humour and firing off these one-liners and just looking so much like Princess Anne anyway, and having that incredible rapport with Philip and with Charles. She just was total highlight for me.
Oh yeah, not low profile at all.
I hope she gets her own episode.
Oh yeah, hope she gets her own series. Visiting all the like toothpaste factories of southern England. But thank you so much for listening. If you like the episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts.
You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at AirheadsPod and on Facebook at Airheads.
And we'll see you in a couple of minutes to talk about the last 4 episodes, I guess. Bye.
Bye.